I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Well, today we're going to be talking about what it really means to be saved, and not just once, but again and again. Now, in August 2016, Darren Edwards was a mountaineer and an army reservist climbing in North Wales when a section of rock that he was on gave way right beneath his feet. He fell around 100 feet, broke his spine, and he was left paralyzed from the chest down. Now, in those critical moments, it was his climbing partner, a great friend of his who was on the rope, who literally saved his life and ran towards him and did that. And then a chain of rescuers, medics, specialists who kept him there. Now, since then, paralyzed, Darren has refused to let that be the end of his story. He has kayaked the length of the UK. He's led teams of injured veterans on extreme expeditions. He's even worked with Great Britain in paracanoe, and he's turned that near-fatal accident into a mission to redefine impossible. And now he is preparing for his next big test, an attempt to sit-ski to the South Pole, aiming to break the world record for the longest sit-ski journey in Antarctic history, up to 10 hours a day on the ice, temperatures below -40, to raise money and hope for people with spinal cord injuries. So today we're going to talk about the fall, about the dark days in hospital as well, and how adventure kind of became a saving grace for him. And we're going to look ahead to the sit-ski that he's about to do. But more than that, Darren is someone who just has remarkable words of motivation, someone who has been knocked down but found incredible ways to keep going, and, as we both agree, is now a stronger, perhaps better person than he was beforehand. So again, finding sometimes the positive in the most traumatic events. So look, thanks for joining me. And Darren, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Darren, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Our theme at the moment is saved. And I wonder, when you hear that word, after everything that you've been through, what does the idea of saved mean to you now?
I think it stands for, second chance. For me, I've had a second chance at life because of two people that saved me. One on the day of my accident and one in the weeks that followed.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we've spoken, you and I, a bit before, and first of all, there was what happened on that day, and I'll talk about it in a moment, what happened when you were paralyzed. But there was also a moment during your recovery where you were at rock bottom, and it was something that your physio said to you, and I think this is so important, that really pulled you together and pulled you through. What was happening at that time?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, as I'm sure you can, you understand, and like sometimes the toughest battles are the mental ones. The physical scars tend to heal quicker than the psychological ones. And for me, I'm 4.5 months into my rehab, 4.5 months after my life changed. And the last thing I expected was for my relationship, with the woman that, as far as I was concerned and aware, I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And 4.5 months later, that person comes in and says, I can't do it. I love you, but I don't think I love you enough to stand next to you for these next few years and for the journey. I'm really sorry. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that absolutely broke my heart. And that was the real rock bottom. And that was the start of a very difficult period for me in terms of my mental health and my reason for being. I felt like I'd lost a massive part of who I was in my loss of mountaineering and climbing, but also then a loss of a relationship. And it was my physio, Kate, who in the weeks that followed kind of came up to me and just said, look, I know there's nothing I can say that is going to flick that switch in your brain, and it's not going to hurt. But if there's one thing that you could do for me, it's to not focus on how you feel and how much it hurts, but to focus on the man that you want to become. And she just said to me, look, think about who you are 4 years from now, what Darren Edwards has gone on to achieve, what he stands for. And when you've got that image in your head, retrace his steps to right here, right now, this conversation with me, feeling bruised and battered by the events of life. And, when you've got that image, just take tiny steps towards who you want to become. And that advice helped me to reframe the way I looked at adversity and the way I looked at that loss of a relationship and loss of identity, because all of a sudden I had something to work towards.
Yeah. I wonder if if sort of your partner was also one of the most motivating things for you, that you wanted to get better for her too. And so the loss of that relationship almost felt like the loss of one of your great motivations at that point.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, no, entirely. I think I wanted to show her that I could overcome and I could adapt and I could learn and I could grow. And in my head, we were going to be that couple, the couple that others walked past on top of a hill and kind of went, wow, look at those two. He's in a wheelchair. She doesn't care. They're at the top of a hill, loving life. And that was the image I had in my head of a year from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. So suddenly to lose that motivator and to lose that image that you'd so kind of like persistently work towards in those really difficult weeks and months in the aftermath of my accident. Yeah, that really hurt. That was my rock bottom. And that's where, people like Kate come forward in life and save you. Yeah. And she saved me.
It's interesting because I don't think that many people, and maybe I'm wrong with this, let me know. I don't know if that many people can find the ability to refocus their mind, to give themselves a more driving force like that. Well, I know that you found it after you fell, you said, let's make sure this doesn't change me forever. But is that something that everyone has deep down, that ability to, in traumatic moments, to find a way through and adapt? Or do you think that not everyone does it and you do have it?
No, I think we do. I'm married to a primary school teacher now, and I've gone in and done talks to her children about what I've been through, and I find that kids are really resilient naturally, and some of the life events they've gone through at such a young age they can overcome. And maybe it's just something that we unlearn as we grow up. We kind of build these walls of comfort, and we forget that actually we build resilience by doing difficult things and failing and learning to get back up again. So I think for me, my accident was just an instigator of realizing how resilient you can be in times of real adversity. But also, I look back to all of my experiences mountaineering and with the Special Forces Reserve here in the UK, and all of those experiences, I think, helped me to reach that moment of, like you referenced, on the cliff edge, making that promise of whatever happens next, just don't let it beat you, because that was such a key part of the mindset of a mountaineer and the mindset that the Special Forces try and drill into you. It's you adapt, you improvise, you overcome. You don't just give up. You don't fall flat on your back and stay there. You fall flat on your back and you pick your up and you go again.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of nature nurture. I've always tried to decide which is both, but I think that Special Forces and the training you get in the military also perhaps gives you the ability to trains you how to be able to think that way. And many of the people I've spoken to who have served, particularly Special Forces, they seem to have developed a further ability to bounce back like that. I wonder if you could take me back first of all to what happened in 2016 in North Wales and the accident.
Yeah, so I was climbing that day with my best friend. We'd climbed for 10 years by that point. We discovered a love of climbing and mountaineering together. We'd climbed all around the UK and Europe and a little bit around the world. And we went to a rock face not far from where we live, so just inside the national park in North Wales. And it was a rock face with a certain reputation for being kind of treacherous, perhaps. It's called World's End. So it's got a brilliant title for the kind of, for scene setting, perhaps. And it's a vertical limestone rock face. It's broken up into 4 big sort of what we would refer to as pitches in climbing, so big sort of sections that you climb in turn. And on that day, me and Matt are alternating who's the lead climber, so who's taking the risk. And after a few hours, we're stood on a tiny little ledge, which is 3/4 of the way to the top of World's End. And there's one final section that's sort of towering up above us. And I kind of say to Matt, I'll lead this one. And I walk away from him. I see my start point, which is like a vertical crack that runs to the top of World's End. And, I start to climb. And what I loved about climbing was that kind of the battle of the inner panic, and how you got to calm your breathing and calm your heart in those moments of exposed risk, and how you move your body efficiently and fluidly. And a couple of minutes later, I've got myself to the top, and I look down at my best friend. I give him a smile, put my thumbs up, and I'm just sort of indicating to him that I'm at the top of the climb. I'm not totally out of harm's way yet, but I'm as good as can be. So I look down at him and I face away from the drop, so it's now behind me, and I go to take a step. And it's as I go to take that step that the the rock face beneath me sort of instantly cracked, snapped, and in a split second, I've gone from, position of safety and security to a position of complete fear and the unknown, because as I heard that crack and I felt that snap, a split second later, a chunk of World's End has collapsed beneath my feet. And all of a sudden I'm being thrown from the top of that rock face. And the only real thing between me and the very bottom was Matt and that tiny ledge. And in those next 2, 3, 4 seconds, time really kind of extended for me, and it felt like 20, 30 minutes. And as I'm falling, I know there's nothing I can do to change the course of events. But what happens is my best friend, saves my life, because I slam into that ledge a few seconds later. I land flat on my back, and I don't know it at the time, but I've broken my back on impact and severed my spinal cord. And I instantly start to tumble towards the next drop. And it's as I'm tumbling towards the next drop that Matt sprints in my direction, and at the last possible moment gets to me and throws his body on top of mine, just hoping to pin me to the floor. And he did. He saved my life by putting his body, his life on the line. And he dragged me back from that drop. And I think in that moment, I certainly realized what my best friend had done for me. I don't think he perhaps thought about the fact he'd risked his life to do it, but he did. And that started a 3-hour rescue from that exposed ledge at World's End. A mountain rescue team were there after an hour, Coast Guard helicopter after 2 hours. And ultimately, it's 3 hours before I'm about to be airlifted out and flown to an intensive care ward somewhere in the UK. And yeah, wow. I know that you know this. Those moments after that life-changing moment happened, they're uncertain, scary, intimidating. And at the end of those 3 hours, like we said before this call, I made myself the most important promise of my life, which is whatever happens next, just don't let it beat you. And I grabbed Matt and said, whatever happens next, just don't let me give up. So I was, getting my best friend to hold me to account. And yeah, that was the start of the journey.
You're listening to Searching for Heroes. We'll be right back after this. And I'm sure that he's been there ever since, probably reminded you that you said that, probably been alongside you throughout your recovery. So, I mean, that he risked his own life to save yours. He was there with you for 3 hours, and I'm sure he's been continuing part of your journey ever since. Yeah,
he has been. I think you hit the nail on the head. He was there every single day. He sat next to my bed, even when I wasn't conscious or able to talk because I was recovering in intensive care. A few months later, we talk about the breakup of that relationship. A few months later, so 4.5 months later after my accident, after that relationship ended, and when Kate kind of gave me that advice, I announced to Matt that I wanted to be part of Britain's Paralympic kayaking team and win a gold medal. And he didn't think, Darren, you have never kayaked or canoed in your life. That is totally stupid. He stood next to me and said, well, we've got to buy you a kayak. And then he drove me later that day to a kayak and a canoe shop, and we went up to the guy behind the counter, bought a kayak, bought a paddle, bought a buoyancy aid, had absolutely no idea what I was buying or what I was doing. And Matt stood next to me and did exactly the same. Bought a kayak, bought a paddle, bought a buoyancy aid. And the day after I was discharged, after 5 months of intensive rehab, the next day Matt had booked, along with my friends, the local swimming pool for 2 hours and convinced them to let us rock up with this bloke in a wheelchair who was recently paralyzed. And he and my other close friends and family taught me to paddle in a swimming pool. So yeah, you're right.
That community, honestly, I mean, it can help you get through almost anything. People coming together and being there by your side. Did you know you were paralyzed while you were waiting those 3 hours, or?
I think in my heart, I knew I was. I really wanted to believe that. I think both me and Matt wanted to believe that I was just in shock. But after the dust had settled, the main pain was from my arm, because as I'd fallen through that rock, I'd severed my right arm. So there's a scar that runs from my wrist all the way up to my shoulder. And that was the only thing that was really hurting. So as far as I was concerned, I just split my arm open and everything else was okay. And then a few minutes later, I can't sort of like take the pain of the arm anymore. And I'm like, right, I've got to stand up. I've got to get up and walk away from this because this is hurting too much. And it was as I went to stand up that nothing below my chest moved. And I felt like the whole world pivoted on my back. And there was that moment of realizing, I think, that you're looking down at your inanimate body and then you're trying to do the things that you took for granted only a few hours ago, which was to wiggle a toe or to lift a knee slightly. And I'm looking down at this body that is no matter how hard I try, not responding. And as soon as a mountain rescue team turn up and that Coast Guard helicopter turn up, the word that really was repeated multiple times was spinal injury. And I think in that moment, I knew that I was paralyzed, but I hoped that, with the right mindset, anything is, you can do anything in rehab. And it wasn't until the next day where I woke up on the ICU, and the surgeon who operated on me the night before kind of told me what had happened. And that was the force of the impact had snapped my spine into two pieces at T6, which is kind of around your sternum level. And the force of that had entirely severed my spinal cord. And that meant that, these are his words, by the way, that means that no matter how hard you try, if you focus on this for the next year or two of your life, there is no future version of you where you're stood back up on your feet. And I'm afraid there's no version of you in the future who's back in the mountains. And I'm really sorry. And that was like a knife being driven into what remained. And the moment that I think the penny suddenly did drop, and I had to, like play this rapid game of coming to terms with the fact that your life tomorrow is going to be significantly different to your life yesterday, Yeah. And for me, there was never going to be a physical recovery beyond what I already had. So it was more about rehab, optimizing what still works, and not searching for that kind of, that miracle recovery and walking back out of the ward.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I hear you talk about what happened and these incredible moments of absolute, sureness and dedication and knowing you're going to put one step in front of the other. But I imagine that the truth is that it's a real journey, and that for all those ups, there were equally difficult, dark times. And did you find that it was a journey that one day you said, no matter what it takes, I'm going to do it? And on other days, you just said, I don't know how, or I will never be able to? Like were the equivalent dark days as there were the positive days?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a fact that we probably both know. It's those. I think you made a very good point that those first 4.5 months, however scared I was and however vulnerable I felt, and however much I struggled to come to terms with the fact that life was going to look significantly different, and I would need to get used to that label of disabled and spinally injured. A massive part of my drive was to show my partner, to show her that I could handle it, and that I would bounce back, and I would be this kind of, I would still be me. I'd be on wheels, but I'd still be me, and it wouldn't stop life. So that was such a big motivator for me, was to show her normality and to show myself that this wasn't the end. This was just the start of something slightly different. And then that only made the fall and the loss of that relationship even harder, because suddenly a big motivator's gone. Your reason for being is gone. That's how it felt. And I suddenly went from, yes, having dark moments, but being able to kind of like apply perspective and reframe it. So there's a photo from the day of my accident that somebody took and posted on Twitter, and it was them down at the roadside looking up at this rock face, and you see these like tiny red jackets, which was the mountain rescue team. And for me, that photo was like, perspective. And I guess for you referenced the fact that you lost friends and colleagues and you survived, and that is your perspective. And that photo for me kind of does the same thing, because it suddenly hits home how lucky I was to not fall any further, because I would have been dead. Yeah. But that was that easy perspective, adjustment was a lot harder after I lost that reason for being in her. And there were some definite dark moments after that where I genuinely didn't want to be here anymore. And I mean, you can put two and two together and get what I'm trying to say there. Yeah. And all of a sudden, my life looked even harder. And I went from expecting to be discharged to the home that we shared together to being discharged to, of all things, my nan's house, because it was the only house that was wheelchair suitable and had a stair lift. And the next couple of years, whilst I still had this desire and fire to achieve that 4-year version of me going to the Paralympics, and I was working towards that felt like professional me, but personal me was really still struggling below the surface, struggling with identity, struggling with living at his nan's house, and coming to terms with the fact I'd need to fall in love again, but at the same time not wanting to trust anybody, because I knew how much it hurt to lose that person, for someone to just up sticks and leave you when you thought that they unconditionally loved you.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance. Who you are, I suppose, because part of you says I'm exactly the same person, and then the other half of you says, no, I'm a totally different person. And I certainly found that it took quite a few years for those two to sort of come together and to figure out who the new me was. And I went back and forth for a while. But I would say I am now a different person. I'm similar in many ways, but I'm different in many ways. And that's who I currently am. So do you think that you are the same person, a different person? Like how have you changed in that sense?
I think I wouldn't have said this for the first few years, but I'm an improved version of the old me, because the old version of me was quite, I was quite extrinsically motivated. I cared an awful lot about what other people thought about me. I think that's what drew me to the Special Forces Reserve, was to show other people that I could be tough and do difficult things. And probably that's a part of the motivation for climbing and mountaineering as well. It's to be seen doing something difficult. Whereas now for me, the motivations are a lot more intrinsic, and it's about kind of proving things to myself and setting a good example. Like you do this brilliantly, setting an example for other people that follow in your footsteps. You know, you're not trying to impress anybody, but you're trying to be somebody that empowers and enables other people by having the right attitude and mindset. But for me, you know, I don't think I realized what you've just said until 4 years later. And there was this moment where that 4-year image of where I wanted to be, like I said, was me at the Paralympics with a gold medal around my neck. And ultimately, I missed out on qualification to the Paralympics by one space, by half a second of all things. And instead of feeling like I'd failed and I'd just given up and waiting another 4 years, I came up with the idea of, no one has ever kayaked the length of the UK, from Land's End to John O'Groats. You'll be familiar with. The American audience probably won't know those two places, but they're kind of as far away from each other as you can get in the UK. And I put together this injured veterans team, and we kayaked 1,400 kilometres in 26 days from the Atlantic Ocean, the Irish Sea, the North Sea, some massively wild and wonderful places. And about 1,000 into that journey, 3 weeks in, we're in Scotland. We've just crossed the border into Scottish waters, and it was the anniversary of my accident. And on that day, there was no wind, no waves, perfect calm. And I'm paddling along, and I'm thinking about the journey of the last 4 years. And I was kind of coming to this realization that everything I had in my life now was exactly what I'd ever wanted to be happy. And that was a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, a sense of friendship and camaraderie, a sense of adventure. I was about to do something that outperformed anything the old me had done. And, I'm not just saying this to exaggerate the story at this point, but as I'm thinking that, this bottlenose dolphin jumps up out of the water in front of my boat and sort of nosedives back in. And all of a sudden, there's a pod of dolphins swimming beneath our kayaks and swimming beneath our support boat. And in that moment, my answer, to the question, if you could go back, and I'm sure people have asked you this as well, and you've probably you've asked yourself this at various points in your journey. It took 4 years, but on that day, my answer categorically changed from yes, and I would do anything to go back, to change it, to no. And I think it took 4 years to come to that acceptance.
Yeah, that's so funny. I feel exactly the same way, to be honest. And, you can either look at it about the things that were taken away from it, or you can put up a whole long list of the amazing things that I have been able to do and that you've been able to do because of it. And I'm just so fascinated, again, I said it earlier, whether everyone is able to do that or not able to do that. And, it's still a question I don't have an answer to. But yes, I wouldn't change it at all. I would change it all to bring back the people who are with me in a heartbeat. For sure. But I still think that I have discovered someone that I didn't know before, and I've become stronger and I'm prouder in many ways. So, no, I feel exactly the same way. Yeah. I'm interested in that your relationship with sort of adventure, risk, doing things like that didn't change. Some people might say, well, you're not going to go and kayak from Land's End to John O'Groats. You're certainly not going to go and sit ski to the South Pole, but you never lost that sense of adventure. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it was the thing that I was most scared of losing. Apart from, while I was falling at World's End, the only thing I thought about were the people in my life I was never going to get to say goodbye to, and that was the real internal tragedy of those couple of seconds. So I didn't think about, oh my God, I'm never going to climb a mountain again. It was a lot more basic than that. It was I'm never going to see my mum and my sister and my dad and my girlfriend and my best friends. But I think once I knew I had them and I could see them again and say, I love you and I'm so sorry, the thing that was next on that list was that sense of adventure, like you just said. And you know, is this the end of that journey and that chapter of my life? So I think I stubbornly refused to accept that it would be. And that's probably where the kayak came into the equation, because, you know, if you can't climb to the top of a mountain, then you're damn well right, I'm going to be paddling alongside it and looking up and appreciating, you know, the beauty of that. And yeah, no, I never lost that sense of it. I think my relationship with risk changed, where I was definitely more risk aware. And I know we're joking about the fact that in a week's time I'm setting off to go to the South Pole, and you know there's very obvious risk there, particularly for somebody with a spinal injury. But I'm definitely more aware, and I consciously work through the mitigation process of that risk. Where, I don't know, you know, climbing a mountain, I probably didn't once think about what are the potential outcomes here that are negative. You know, it was just, you know, perhaps that in your 20s, you think that you're just completely indestructible and nothing's, you know, it happens to other people and not you. And that's probably what I was guilty of thinking of before my accident. Yeah. Whereas now I'm kind of aware of, you know, the risks of hypothermia and -40 when I can't feel below my chest. So we've gone through the process of innovating kit that will protect my extremities from those kind of conditions.
You're listening to Searching for Heroes. We'll be right back after this. Tell me a little bit about this. I mean, sort of this rather remarkable, mad thing you're about to do. Sit ski, 10 hours a day, is that right? Just non-stop?
Yeah. So we're attempting to double the world record. So in history, only 2 people have sit skied to the South Pole, which I guess for a visual reference point is like a wheelchair without the wheels, 2 skis beneath it, and you use 2 reinforced ski poles just to dig into the ice and push yourself forward. It's slow and it's hard, basically. And what we're attempting to do is to double that distance. So we're attempting to ski over 230 kilometers to the South Pole. You know, what I didn't realize is that the South Pole is at 9,000 foot elevation. So from the moment we start our expedition, we're climbing for those 20 days. And yeah, I'm going to be supported by a team of 3, including the chief scout for the UK, an incredible adventurer called Lucy Shepherd, and one of my closest friends called Matthew. And yeah, it's going to be, like I said, a 20-day expedition from our start point to hopefully the South Pole. And we've called it Redefining Impossible because probably like me, you have been told on countless occasions that certain things are impossible, off limits, don't even think about it. And for me, you know, this expedition is about encouraging others to challenge those impossibles in their own life, because I was told even some very basic things that I do without thinking about nowadays wouldn't be possible. And one of them was, you know, paddling a kayak when you don't have any core muscles or leg muscles. And hey presto, yeah, you fall in a lot, but you can still do it.
Yeah, amazing. How can people help you, first of all? Like people listening to this, how can they donate? What can they do?
Yeah, so we're doing this for, thank you for teeing this bit up. So we're doing this for Wings for Life, which is the charity formed by Red Bull, and they're looking for a cure for spinal injury. They fund research projects all around the world, and last year they had a project in Switzerland where a man paralyzed 14 years ago called David MZ stood up and with the help of a Zimmer frame walked across a room. And I think for the whole spinal injury community around the world, that was a real jaw drop moment where this kind of faint hope of maybe someday in the future became quite a concrete belief that we're on the cusp of curing spinal injury. And maybe it will never help me because I've been injured too long or whatever, but it may help a version of me. So we're looking to raise over £100,000. So that'd be, I don't know, $130,000 for Wings for Life. We're going to be the first expedition team ever to be able to document a expedition via video content at the end of every day, thanks to Starlink technology. So if people want to follow the journey, which starts, you know, at the very beginning of December, they can do that on social media if they just look up Darren Edwards, and that's where the links for donating will be as well. So yeah,
I will be retweeting all of those as well and following you every step of the way, and perhaps happy that you're doing it, not me, because I love doing difficult things and pushing myself, but being at the South Pole has never been one that crossed my mind, to be honest.
Well, I think we owe it to each other to come up with an idea where we do together. I think that would be something special.
Let's do it, honestly. Let's think of something when you're back, and let's go film something. Let's go.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Set a goal for ourselves. I agree.
Let's do it.
let's say to finish up, let's say someone is listening right now and they're going through something really difficult. They're in the middle of their fall. Well, I suppose whether that's physical or emotional. What would you say to them? How would you motivate them? How would you tell them to pick themselves up and keep moving forward in the way that you've done?
I think I know, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you know as well what it feels like to have those moments where you feel like you've lost hope, and those moments where you just cannot see the light through the trees. You're at your rock bottom. You don't need to be at world's end to have that rock bottom. Like we said earlier, those psychological battles are tougher than the physical battles. And for me, I think there's no advice I can give more powerful than Kate's advice, because I would argue that in that moment, anybody, when they're not sure, whether they're resilient enough or strong enough to get through it, don't lose sight of the person that you want to become or could become or can become. And, it doesn't have to be 4 years from now, but just think about a year from now. How do I want to have turned this around? And remember that for you, you're not defined by the moment your life changed. And for me, I'm not defined by world's end. We are defined by how we respond to those moments of adversity. And everybody is capable of doing that, and doing it with a sense of aspiration and optimism for the future, even in those moments where they don't even believe that there will be. And, for me, I'm happily married now to the love of my life. We adopted a beautiful baby boy earlier this year. Oh. And, in the aftermath of that breakup, I didn't believe anybody would ever love me again, and how wrong I was. So,
yeah, amazing. And I suppose that's the other side as well, as if you know someone who maybe isn't doing so well, you can be a map to them and go there, pick up the phone, be there for someone who's not doing so well. What goes around comes around, and we've all got to be more proactive, I think, in reaching out, and checking out everyone's doing well.
Yeah, amen to that.
Amen. Hey, Darren, what a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for being on. And I'm going to reach out before you head off to the South Pole and wish you luck then. But thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving everyone hope. Thank you for showing people that they can stand up when they've been knocked down. And I know that these stories make a difference to people who are going through difficult moments. So just thank you for all of it. Thank you.
No, likewise. Thank you for having me on.
It's interesting because sometimes you have guests on who who just really resonate with you. And I think Darren really resonated with me. Perhaps it's because we shared quite a lot of experiences, or our journeys seem to have quite a lot in common. But the words that his physio told him, imagine who you will be in 4 years' time and work to be that person, reminded me of the physios that I had, reminded me how setting yourself those goals and working towards them can get you through anything. And interestingly, we also talked about whether it's nature or nurture. Does everyone have that ability in them to look past the worst and find the best? Or only some people? And I want to believe Darren when he says everyone has it in them. And for a long time, I thought everyone did. But I'm still undecided, I have to be honest. So reach out to me. Let me know how you feel about that. But more than that, just very grateful to have spoken to Darren. And I suppose willing him on as he attempts to sit ski to the South Pole, which is a remarkable task if he does that. So follow him online, reach out and try and help him raise money as well, because I've spoken to a few people with spinal cord injuries and incredible developments happening in that field as well. So look, I hope that lifted you up today. I hope if you're having a difficult day yourself, it'll teach you to find a way through, keep moving. There's always something better on the other side, always something positive. And go and have a great day. Don't waste a moment of it. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.